Welcome to the Night Gallows. Creepy forest. Haunted mansion. Creepy apparition. Scary stalker. Welcome to the Night Gallows. Scary stories. The first story, The Doll in the Attic. In a quiet town nestled deep within the shadows of ancient forests, there stood a dilapidated mansion known as the Thornwood Estate. The mansion had long been abandoned, shrouded in rumors of dark events that had transpired within its walls. One particular legend, whispered among the locals in hushed tones, spoke of a cursed doll named Serafina. Serafina was no ordinary doll. Crafted with intricate detail, her porcelain skin was flawless, her glassy eyes held an eerie depth, and her delicate lips curled into a permanent, unsettling smile. She had been a prized possession of the Thornwood family, who were said to have possessed a fascination with the occult and the supernatural. The tale of Serafina began to unfold on a moonless night, when a bolt of lightning struck the mansion's towering oak tree, splintering it in two. The very same night, a group of adventurous teenagers, drawn by the mansion's mysterious allure, dared each other to spend the night within its forsaken walls. Unbeknownst to them, Serafina lay hidden within a dusty attic, her lifeless eyes fixed on their every move. As the clock struck midnight, a low, mournful wail echoed through the mansion's halls. The wind howled outside, carrying whispers of a long-forgotten incantation. Up in the attic, Serafina's glassy eyes blinked and her fingers twitched ever so slightly. The threads of an ancient spell, interwoven with dark magic, had been triggered by the storm's fury. One by one, the teenagers began to sense an unsettling presence creeping around them. Shadows danced along the walls, and the air grew icy cold. A voice, barely a whisper, echoed in their minds, each word dripping with malevolence. "I see you." As fear gnawed at their hearts, the group searched for the source of the voice, their flashlights revealing flickering images of the doll, Serafina. Her porcelain visage was no longer frozen in stillness, her fingers twitched and her lips twisted into a sinister grin. Panic ensued, and they attempted to flee the mansion, but the doors slammed shut, sealing them inside with the malevolent force that had been unleashed. One by one, the group members faced their own personal horrors. The doll seemed to feed on their deepest fears, manipulating reality itself to torment them. One saw the walls drip with blood, another was pursued by shadowy figures, and yet another found themselves lost in a labyrinthine corridor that shifted and twisted with every step. As dawn approached, the storm's fury subsided, and the ancient spell's power began to wane. The once united group had been shattered by terror and paranoia. Desperate and broken, they realized that the only way to break the curse was to confront the doll itself. Gathering their courage, they ventured back to the attic, where Serafina waited, perched on a dusty chest. Her glassy eyes glowed with malevolent energy, and her delicate fingers flexed with anticipation. One by one, they recounted their harrowing experiences, defying the doll's attempts to plunge them into further fear. With a collective effort, they shattered the doll, breaking the curse that had held them captive within the mansion's walls. The atmosphere shifted, the malevolent presence faded, and a sense of relief washed over them. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the attic's windows, the mansion seemed to sigh, releasing the grip of darkness that had clung to its very essence. Yet, as they made their way out of the mansion, a chilling wind whispered that the story of Serafina was far from over. Legends have a way of enduring, and the cursed doll's malevolent energy still lingers in the shadows, waiting for another opportune moment to rise again and torment the souls unlucky enough to cross its path. So, dear listener, beware of abandoned mansions and the allure of curiosity, for you may stumble upon a sinister secret that defies explanation and reason. The end of story 1. Now for the second story. The Cursed Mirror. In the heart of a quiet, unassuming apartment complex stood apartment 303, a place that harbored a chilling secret. Its resident, Sarah, had always been an independent soul, drawn to the cozy space that held her solitude and creativity. Little did she know, the antique mirror that hung in her living room was a gateway to something sinister that dwelled just beyond her reflection. Sarah had come across the mirror at a vintage shop one foggy autumn afternoon. Its ornate frame and aged glass had an air of mystique that called out to her, whispering tales of hidden worlds. Mesmerized by its beauty, she purchased it and hung it on her wall, unaware of the malevolent presence that had awakened within. It started subtly, a fleeting movement in the corner of her eye, a barely audible whisper that seemed to come from within the mirror's depths. Sarah shrugged off these occurrences as figments of her imagination, the result of a tired mind playing tricks. But as the days turned into weeks, the incidents grew bolder. One night, as she stood in front of the mirror brushing her hair, a faint whisper transformed into a chilling voice that murmured her name. Her heart raced, but curiosity overpowered her fear. She leaned in, her breath fogging the glass, and whispered back, "Who are you?" The mirror's surface rippled like water, and a figure emerged from within, an eerie reflection of Sarah herself, but twisted and sinister. Its eyes gleamed with malevolence, its smile a grotesque mockery of her own. "I am the shadow that has always followed you," it hissed, its voice a cacophony of hollow tones. Terror seized Sarah's heart, and she stumbled back, her pulse thundering in her ears. From that moment, the mirror's influence seeped into every corner of her life. Distorted whispers grew louder, tormenting her dreams and waking hours alike. The reflection taunted her with secrets only she knew, secrets she had never shared with a soul. It was as if the mirror had become a gateway to her innermost fears and insecurities. Desperation set in, and Sarah sought help from every corner, psychologists, priests, paranormal experts, all in vain. The sinister reflection's power only intensified, its malevolence spreading like a stain across her existence. Friends and family noticed her decline, the sparkle in her eyes replaced by a haunting emptiness. One moonlit night, driven to the brink of madness, Sarah devised a plan. Armed with a small hammer, she stood before the mirror, her own reflection staring back at her. With a trembling hand, she struck the glass, shattering it into 1,000 shards. But instead of relief, a searing pain tore through her, and a chorus of agonized whispers filled the room. From the broken mirror, a vortex of darkness emerged, a swirling maelstrom that consumed everything in its path. Sarah was helpless as her apartment was engulfed by the abyss, the very fabric of reality unraveled by the malevolent force that had been unleashed. As the void swallowed her, the last thing she heard was the mocking laughter of her own reflection. And so, apartment 303 became a place of unsolved mystery, a cautionary tale whispered among neighbors. The shattered mirror was never found, and Sarah's fate remained a dark enigma. Some say that on foggy autumn nights, the air around the apartment complex grows cold, and a distorted whisper echoes through the halls, a whisper that speaks of a shadowy figure glimpsed within shattered glass, a figure forever trapped between worlds, waiting for its next victim to come closer and peer into the depths of its malevolent gaze. It was the day before Halloween, and the streets were filled with the sounds of children's laughter and excited chatter. But as the sun began to set, the mood shifted, and the air grew thick with an unsettling energy. In a small town, a group of friends had decided to spend the night in an old, abandoned mansion that was said to be haunted. They had heard the rumors of strange noises, ghostly apparitions, and sinister secrets hidden within its walls. But they were determined to uncover the truth and prove that the rumors were nothing more than foolish superstition. As they explored the mansion, they were greeted by the creaking of old wooden floors and the drip of water from ancient pipes. They shone their flashlights down dark hallways, illuminating dusty furniture and cobweb-covered chandeliers. But as the night wore on, the lights began to flicker and the temperature dropped rapidly. Suddenly, they heard a blood-curdling scream coming from upstairs. Without hesitation, they rushed up the stairs, their hearts racing with fear. When they reached the source of the scream, they found a young girl locked behind a creepy door. "Who are you?" they asked, their voices trembling with fear. "I don't know," the girl replied. "I woke up and found the door locked from the outside. I've been here for hours." The friends tried to open the door, but it was firmly locked. They then knew they had to find a way to escape the mansion before they also end up being locked away. As they searched for a way out, they stumbled upon a hidden room filled with strange artifacts and occult symbols. And in the center of the room, they saw a figure standing in the shadows, its face hidden in darkness. "Who are you?" they demanded, their voices shaking with fear. The figure didn't respond, but instead began to advance towards them, its movements slow and deliberate. The friends tried to run, but their legs felt heavy and sluggish, as if they were trapped in a nightmare from which they could not escape. Suddenly, the figure spoke in a low, guttural voice, its words sending chills down their spines. "I am the spirit of the mansion," it said, "and you have disturbed my peace. Now, you must pay the price." With that, the figure lunged forward, its arms outstretched, its fingers extended like claws. The friends tried to defend themselves, but their attacks were useless against the spirit's inexplicable strength. As the sun began to rise, the friends realized that they were trapped in the mansion forever, at the mercy of the vengeful spirit that haunted it. And they knew that on Halloween, the spirit would rise again, hungry for fresh victims to add to its sinister collection. Deep in the heart of the dense, foreboding woods, there lies an ancient path known as the Trail of Whispers. Locals speak of its eerie reputation, warning each other to steer clear of its cursed route. They say that the whispers of lost souls, trapped in the dark undergrowth, echo through the gnarled trees, filling the air with chilling dread. One moonless night, two adventurous friends, Sarah and Jake, decided to challenge the stories and venture into the woods. Armed with flashlights and bravado, they stepped onto the forbidden path. The crunching of twigs under their boots echoed like eerie laughter, but their hearts pounded with excitement. As they delved deeper into the woods, the silence became oppressive. Not even the nocturnal creatures dared to disturb the sacred solitude of the Trail of Whispers. Despite their nerves, Sarah and Jake pushed forward, eager to unveil the mystery hidden within. Their flashlights flickered, casting ominous shadows that danced around the trees like specters. Sarah felt an inexplicable pull, an invisible force urging her to keep walking, while Jake's unease grew with every step. Still, they pressed on, entwined in the otherworldly allure of the woods. Suddenly, a soft, mournful whisper rustled through the leaves. Sarah's heart raced as she turned to Jake, who had gone pale. He hesitated but kept moving, unable to shake the unsettling feeling that clung to him like cobwebs. They walked for what seemed like hours, each bend in the path leading them deeper into the heart of the forest. Sarah's curiosity was replaced by a gnawing fear, but she refused to let the trail defeat her. As they continued, the whispers grew louder and more distinct, like fragmented voices from a forgotten past. Sarah strained to understand the words, but they remained elusive, slipping away like wisps of smoke. Her mind played tricks on her, hearing her name called out from the shadows, but she told herself it was merely the wind. In the distance, they noticed an ominous, dim glow. It emanated from a clearing ahead, drawing them closer like moths to a flame. They approached with trepidation, their flashlights barely cutting through the thickening darkness. In the clearing stood an ancient stone altar, moss-covered and weathered by time. The eerie glow surrounded it, pulsating with a spectral aura. Sarah felt an inexplicable connection to the stone, as if it whispered secrets from centuries past. Jake, overcome with unease, pleaded with Sarah to turn back. But she was entranced, drawn by an unseen force compelling her to touch the ancient stone. As her hand made contact with its surface, a surge of cold energy rushed through her veins. She felt the weight of sorrow and despair from the souls trapped within the woods. Suddenly, the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony of anguished cries, and the woods around them came alive with ghostly apparitions. Shadows danced among the trees, reaching out with spectral hands. Panic gripped Sarah and Jake as they tried to flee, but the spirits seemed to block their path. In a desperate attempt to break free, they ran in different directions. Sarah stumbled and fell, finding herself surrounded by the haunting figures. The spirits bore faces etched in agony, and their pleas for release pierced her soul. Jake, too, found himself encircled by the ethereal beings, each whispering tales of tragedy and loss. He felt their sorrow seeping into his being, overwhelming him with grief. With each passing moment, Sarah and Jake were losing themselves to the spirit's torment. But in the depths of their fear, they remembered the stories told by the locals about the only way to escape the Trail of Whispers. Summoning every ounce of courage, they faced the spirits and spoke aloud the words the legend spoke of: "Forgive us, lost souls, for trespassing in your domain. We seek only to leave this place in peace. Grant us safe passage back to the world of the living." The woods fell silent once more, and the apparitions withdrew. The ancient stone altar's glow dimmed, releasing Sarah and Jake from its grip. The path before them now seemed clearer, leading them away from the haunted clearing. Exhausted and shaken, they stumbled out of the woods as the first light of dawn began to paint the sky. Their hearts were forever marked by the harrowing experience, but they were grateful to return to the world of the living. From that day on, Sarah and Jake warned others of the cursed trail of whispers. They cautioned them to respect the ancient spirits and the boundaries of the haunted woods, knowing that not all who venture into the darkness may return unscathed. And the legend of the Trail of Whispers lived on, forever instilling fear in the hearts of those who dared to tread too close to the world of the forgotten souls.
Chapter 1. The Last Screening. The old Regal Theater stood at the end of Elm Street, its once grand facade now faded and peeling. The marquee, which had once announced the latest Hollywood hits, was now blank, save for a few stray letters that clung to it. Most of the town's residents had forgotten about the Regal, choosing to frequent the new multiplex on the other side of town. But for those who remembered, the theater held a dark secret. It was a chilly October evening when a group of teenagers decided to break into the Regal. They had heard the stories, of course, tales of a projectionist who had gone mad, of audiences who had disappeared during screenings, and of eerie whispers that echoed through the empty halls. But to them, these were just stories, meant to scare little kids. They wanted a place to hang out, away from prying eyes, and the Regal seemed perfect. The front doors were locked, but a side entrance gave way easily. The lobby was dark and musty, the scent of old popcorn still lingering in the air. The group made their way to the main auditorium, their flashlight beams dancing over the rows of tattered seats. "Let's see if the projector still works," said Jake, the de facto leader of the group. He climbed up to the projection booth, and after a few minutes of fumbling around, the old projector whirred to life. The screen lit up, showing a grainy black and white film. The group settled into the front row, laughing and joking as the movie played. But as the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere in the theater began to change. The temperature dropped, and an icy wind seemed to blow from the screen. The characters in the movie began to look directly at the group, their expressions twisted in anger and malice. Suddenly, the film cut to a scene of the very auditorium they were sitting in. On the screen, they could see themselves, looking confused and scared. Then, from the back of the theater, a shadowy figure began to approach them. It was the projectionist, his face pale and eyes hollow. He moved closer and closer, reaching out with long, bony fingers. The group screamed and scrambled to their feet, but the exit doors wouldn't budge. They were trapped. The last thing they heard before everything went black was the eerie laughter of the projectionist echoing through the theater. The next morning, the town was abuzz with the news. The group of teenagers had gone missing, and no one could figure out where they had gone. The old Regal Theater stood silent and empty, its secrets locked away once more. But every now and then, on a cold October night, you can still hear the faint sound of a projector whirring and the distant screams of those who dared to enter. Chapter 2. The Search. The disappearance of the teenagers sent shockwaves through the town. Parents held their children a little tighter, and whispers of the cursed Regal Theater spread like wildfire. The local police, led by Sheriff Daniels, began an immediate search. The last known location of the group was the old theater, so that's where they started. Sheriff Daniels and his team approached the Regal with caution. The stories about the theater were well known, but Daniels was a man of logic. He believed there was a rational explanation for everything. The front doors were locked, just as the kids had found them, but the side entrance was ajar. The officers entered, their flashlights cutting through the thick darkness. The lobby was just as the teenagers had left it, with footprints in the dust leading to the main auditorium. The officers followed the trail, their senses on high alert. The auditorium was eerily silent, the rows of seats standing like silent witnesses to the events of the previous night. Sheriff Daniels motioned for one of his officers to check the projection booth. As the officer climbed the stairs, the old projector suddenly flickered to life, casting a dim light over the room. The screen showed the same grainy black and white film the teenagers had watched, but now, it was different. The film showed the town, its streets, homes, and residents, but everything was twisted and distorted, as if seen through a nightmarish lens. The people on the screen moved with jerky, unnatural motions, their faces contorted in expressions of terror and pain. The officer in the projection booth called out, his voice trembling. "Sheriff, you need to see this." Daniels climbed up to join him and was met with a sight that made his blood run cold. The projector wasn't being run by any machine. Instead, it was being operated by a spectral figure, its form barely visible but its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It was the projectionist. The ghostly figure turned to face them, its gaze piercing. "Looking for the lost souls?" it whispered, its voice echoing through the booth. "They're mine now, just like all the others." Sheriff Daniels, despite his fear, stepped forward. "Release them," he demanded. "This ends now." The projectionist laughed, a sound that sent shivers down their spines. "You cannot stop what has already begun," it said. "But if you wish to join them, stay a while. The show is just beginning." With that, the figure vanished, leaving the officers in stunned silence. The projector continued to play, its images growing darker and more disturbing. Daniels knew they were dealing with something beyond their understanding, something ancient and malevolent. The search of the theater yielded no clues about the whereabouts of the missing teenagers. But as the days turned into weeks, more people began to disappear. The town was in the grip of a terror it couldn't explain, and the old Regal Theater stood at the center of it all. Chapter 3. The Final Reel. The town was on the brink of chaos. With more residents disappearing each day, fear and paranoia ran rampant. Many families packed up and left, while others barricaded themselves in their homes. But a determined group, led by Sheriff Daniels, refused to give in to the terror. They were resolved to confront the malevolent force at the Regal Theater and put an end to the nightmare. Daniels gathered a team of volunteers, including the town's historian, Mrs. Whitman, who believed she had uncovered the origin of the curse. According to her research, the projectionist was once a man named Albert Grimes, who had been wrongfully accused of a crime and lynched by a mob in the very auditorium of the Regal. His spirit, filled with rage and a thirst for vengeance, had bound itself to the theater, feeding off the fear of those who dared to enter. Armed with this knowledge, the group devised a plan. They believed that if they could find Grimes' remains and give him a proper burial, the curse might be broken. With a sense of grim determination, they entered the theater one last time. The Regal seemed to sense their presence, the atmosphere heavy with malevolence. As they made their way to the auditorium, the projector once again sprang to life. This time it showed scenes of the town's past, including the fateful night of Grimes' death. The ghostly figure of the projectionist appeared on the screen, his eyes filled with fury. "You cannot save them," he hissed. "This is my domain." Ignoring his threats, the group began to search the theater. In the basement, hidden behind a false wall, they discovered a small room. Inside, chained to a chair, were the skeletal remains of Albert Grimes. Beside him lay a reel of film labeled The Truth. Daniels and his team carefully removed the remains, while Mrs. Whitman played the film. It showed the real events of that fateful night, revealing Grimes's innocence and the identities of the true culprits. As the truth was unveiled, the atmosphere in the theater began to change. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a sense of peace. The group gave Grimes a proper burial in the town cemetery. As they laid him to rest, a soft breeze swept through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of a projector whirring and the distant laughter of children. The curse of the Regal Theater was broken. The missing residents returned, with no memory of their time in the theater's grasp. Life in the town slowly returned to normal, but the events of those dark days were never forgotten. The Regal was renovated and turned into a museum, dedicated to preserving the history of the town and the memory of Albert Grimes. The old projector was put on display, a silent reminder of the power of truth and the cost of injustice. And while the Regal never showed another film, on certain nights when the moon is full and the wind is just right, you can still hear the faint sound of a projector, followed by the soft applause of an unseen audience forever enjoying the show.
The Haunting Highway. Jacob was a seasoned truck driver, accustomed to long hours on the road and the solitude that came with it. But nothing could have prepared him for the night he found himself driving down a seemingly endless stretch of road that was anything but ordinary. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, casting an eerie pallor over the desolate landscape. Jacob's truck rumbled along the asphalt, the only sound in the stillness of the night. The GPS had led him onto a road he didn't recognize, one that wasn't marked on any of his maps. Now Jacob, with unease prickling at the back of his neck, but he pushed it aside, chalking it up to fatigue and also being emotionally stressed. Miles passed, and the road remained unchanged. The trees lining the highway were gnarled and twisted, their branches reaching out like skeletal sharp knives. Jacob's eyes began to play tricks on him, the shadows morphing into strange shapes that seemed to dance along the roadside. As he drove further and further into the unknown, he felt something getting closer and closer. Suddenly, Jacob's headlights caught something in the distance, a figure standing in the middle of the road. He slammed on the brakes, the screeching of tires slicing through the silence. The figure was a woman, dressed in a flowing white dress, her long hair wild and disheveled. Heart pounding, Jacob leaned out of the window. "Hey, are you okay?" he called out, his voice trembling. The woman didn't respond. She just stood there, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Jacob's unease deepened as he climbed out of the truck and cautiously approached her. "Ma'am, are you lost?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Still, she remained silent, her eyes vacant and distant. Jacob reached out to touch her shoulder, but as his fingers brushed her, an icy chill shot through him. The woman's head snapped towards him, her eyes now piercing and filled with an otherworldly intensity. Jacob stumbled back, his heart racing and Jacob almost fainting. He hurried back to his truck and slammed the door shut, his breath ragged. He tried to restart the engine, but to his horror, it sputtered and died. Panic surged through him as he realized he was stranded on this deserted road with the mysterious woman that is staring at him with dead eyes. As if in response to his fear, the woman began to move, her bare feet making no sound as she glided toward the truck. Jacob's pulse thundered in his ears as he fumbled for his phone, dialing for help. But there was no signal, just a chilling silence that seemed to stretch on forever. The woman reached the side of the truck, her face pressed against the window pane. Her eyes locked onto Jacob's, and he saw something in them, an ancient sadness, a longing that transcended time. She raised her disfigured six-fingered pale hand and tapped on the truck's window, her touch sending ripples of cold through the air. Desperation clawed at Jacob as he gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. He pounded on the dashboard, willing the truck to start. And then, as if answering his plea, the engine roared to life. Jacob wasted no time, flooring the accelerator and tearing down the road. But the woman didn't fade into the distance. She kept pace with the truck, her expression unchanging, her eyes fixed on Jacob's. He pushed the truck harder, the engine straining against the effort. The road stretched on endlessly, the surroundings warping and distorting as if in response to the woman's presence. With a final surge of determination, Jacob's truck burst through a wall of mist, the world beyond revealing a familiar landscape. He was back on a normal road, the moonlight illuminating his surroundings. He glanced in his rearview mirror, his heart pounding in his chest. But the woman was nowhere to be seen. Jacob's breath came in ragged gasps as he continued driving, his mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The memory of the haunting encounter would forever linger in his mind, a reminder that some roads hold secrets that defy explanation and haunt the hearts of those who dare to tread upon them. The edge of fate. Greg was a seasoned truck driver, crisscrossing the country's highways for years with an unwavering confidence in his skills. But on this fateful day, as he navigated a treacherous mountain pass, he found himself on the precipice of a disaster unlike any other. The sun was sinking low in the sky, casting a golden glow across the rugged landscape. Greg's truck hugged the winding road as he descended the steep incline, the weight of his cargo a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked around every bend. The drop-off to his right was sheer and unforgiving, a yawning chasm that beckoned like a hungry maw. As Greg maneuvered the curves with practiced precision, his hands steady on the wheel, a sudden gust of wind buffeted the side of his truck. The sudden force of the wind caused his trailer to sway, pulling the truck dangerously close to the edge of the cliff. Panic surged through him as he fought to regain control, his heart racing in his chest. The world seemed to slow as time stretched into a surreal dance of danger and survival. Greg's breath caught in his throat as he felt the truck's tires teeter on the very edge of the abyss. The abyss stared back at him, a yawning chasm that seemed to hold a mirror to his mortality. With every ounce of strength, Greg wrestled the wheel, his muscles straining against the weight of the truck. His heart pounded like a drum, each beat echoing the precarious balance between life and death. The wheels gripped the asphalt, and the truck slowly began to veer away from the cliff's edge. But the ordeal was far from over. The road continued its descent, the twists and turns demanding his utmost attention. Greg's hands were slick with sweat, his focus unwavering as he guided the truck through the treacherous path. The world outside seemed to blur, the fear and adrenaline merging into a singular, intense awareness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Greg's truck emerged from the mountain pass onto level ground. He pulled over at a turnout, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. The enormity of what had just transpired crashed over him like a wave, and he sat there for a moment, his hands still gripping the steering wheel, his heart gradually slowing its frantic pace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, Greg stepped out of his truck. He walked to the edge of the turnout, gazing down at the cliff he had narrowly escaped. The abyss stared back, a silent reminder of the thin line that separates life from death. In that moment, a profound realization washed over Greg. He had danced on the edge of fate itself, staring into the abyss and emerging on the other side. The experience had shaken him to his core, reshaping his perspective on life, time, and the fragility of existence. With a newfound appreciation for every moment, Greg climbed back into his truck and continued his journey. But now, with the memory of that near-death encounter burning in his mind, Greg navigated each curve with a sense of humility and gratitude, knowing that every second was a gift and that the edge of fate was always lurking, waiting to remind him of its presence. In a world cloaked in the inky shroud of night, three daring friends, Alex, Emma, and Liam, embarked on an adventure that would forever change their lives. Nestled at the heart of a dense forest near the imposing mountains stood an abandoned mine, a place rumored to be haunted by the tormented spirits of miners who had met a grisly fate. Ignoring the ominous stories, the trio, driven by curiosity, trekked deep into the woods, guided only by the dim glow of their lanterns. The forest was dense, the trees casting elongated shadows that danced eerily in the moonlight. As they ventured deeper, the path grew narrower and the air colder, whispering tales of forgotten terrors. Rustling leaves, the occasional distant hoot of an owl, and the eerie silence of the woods created a symphony of unease. Alex, the most skeptical of the group, attempted to mask his fear with humor, cracking jokes to alleviate the growing tension. Finally, the mine's entrance emerged from the darkness like a gaping maw. The wooden beams supporting the entrance were warped and weathered, as if the mine had been devoured by time itself. The wind whistled through the openings, producing mournful tunes that sent shivers down their spines. Taking a collective breath, the friends stepped into the mine, their lanterns casting feeble beams of light into the abyss. The air was heavy with an earthy scent, and the walls seemed to close in on them as they descended deeper into the mine's belly. Every step echoed, creating an eerie symphony of footfalls that reverberated through the tunnels like whispers of the past. As they explored, they discovered relics of the mine's history, rusted pickaxes, discarded helmets, and broken-down carts. The walls were adorned with faded drawings, telling the story of the miners' lives through their intricate sketches. But the deeper they went, the more the mine seemed to transform. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision, and whispers seemed to grow louder, blending with the sound of their own breathing. With every step, their lanterns flickered, casting fleeting shadows that danced in macabre unison. Emma, the most intuitive of the group, couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Liam, normally the fearless one, found his heart racing, a gnawing dread clawing at his insides. Alex's bravado wavered, his jokes now faltering as they journeyed deeper into the heart of the mine's darkness. Suddenly, a voice, faint and distorted, echoed through the tunnel, sending their hearts into overdrive. "Leave, before, too late," it hissed, its source impossible to pinpoint. Emma's grip tightened on her lantern as the walls seemed to close in further, the very air growing colder and heavier. Time lost its meaning in the endless labyrinth of tunnels. Their lanterns now flickered more frequently, their beams feeble against the encroaching darkness. Panic gnawed at their minds, and their whispers to one another were laced with hysteria. Every turn led them deeper into the mine's clutches, and the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, They stumbled upon a chamber unlike the others, a space shrouded in an otherworldly gloom. The air was thick with an oppressive dread, and the walls were adorned with eerie symbols that seemed to writhe and twist. The whispers had grown into anguished cries, voices intertwining in a cacophonous chorus of torment. As the friends stood in the chamber, their lanterns flickered one final time before dying out, plunging them into complete darkness. Fear gripped them like a vice, their breaths quick and shallow. Suddenly, a pale light emanated from the center of the chamber, casting a ghostly glow that revealed a spectral figure, a miner, his form translucent, his eyes hollow voids. The miner's voice, a chorus of countless souls, spoke, recounting tales of suffering and tragedy. They spoke of greed that led to disaster, of lives lost and hopes shattered. The trio listened in horror, unable to move, their minds assaulted by the weight of the past. As the miner's voice grew louder, the chamber seemed to close in on them, walls of despair converging from all sides. But within the depths of their terror, a glimmer of determination ignited. With trembling hands, they reached for each other, forming a bond stronger than fear itself. Liam, drawing upon his courage, spoke to the apparition, his voice quivering but resolute. "We hear your pain, and we acknowledge the suffering that transpired here. But we are not the ones responsible. Let us go, and we will share your story with the world so that your souls can find peace." The chamber trembled, the miner's form flickering before gradually fading away. The darkness began to recede, and the walls seemed to retreat, releasing their grip on the trio. In the faint light, they found their way back to the entrance, emerging from the mine as the first rays of dawn painted the horizon. The friends shared their harrowing experience with the world, using their voices to give voice to the tormented spirits of the mine. As time passed, the stories of the haunted mine spread far and wide, inspiring countless others to honor the past and remember the lives lost to greed and neglect. The forest and the mountains still stand, but the abandoned mine remains a reminder of the depths of human folly and the enduring echoes of tragedy. And whenever the wind whistles through the trees, carrying with it the faintest echo of a whisper, the memories of that fateful night come rushing back, a chilling reminder that the past is never truly forgotten. Story 2, A Chilling Arrival Next Door. Nestled at the outskirts of a quaint town, the house at 34 Briarwood Lane cast an eerie shadow. It was a decaying relic from another time, its windows perpetually curtained, and its garden overgrown with twisted vines. No one had lived there for years, until one fateful day, a figure emerged from the darkness and took residence. Thomas Blackwood, as he introduced himself, had an aura that sent shivers down spines. Tall and gaunt, his sunken eyes were hidden behind round, tinted glasses. His wardrobe consisted of monochromatic suits, and a wide-brimmed hat always rested atop his head, casting his features in perpetual shadow. The neighbors watched in trepidation as he moved in, accompanied by no belongings except for a small, locked suitcase. Whispers spread throughout the town, stories of his past were wild and speculative. Some said he was a recluse, while others believed him to be a former scientist conducting dangerous experiments. As weeks turned into months, unsettling occurrences began to unfold around Thomas Blackwood's abode. The wind carried whispers of strange noises echoing from his house at night, eerie whispers, echoing cries, and the distant ring of unsettling laughter. The garden seemed to writhe with unseen life, as if the plants themselves recoiled from his touch. Local pets disappeared without a trace, their owners fearing the worst. Even the bravest souls avoided walking past the house after sunset, as tales of ghostly apparitions began to circulate. Children dared each other to peek through the windows, claiming to see flickering candlelight and shadowy silhouettes that moved with unnatural fluidity. One moonlit night, a daring group of youngsters decided to investigate further. Armed with flashlights, they tiptoed through the overgrown garden, making their way to the windows of the enigmatic house. Inside, they witnessed Thomas Blackwood engaged in a ritual that chilled their very souls. In a dimly lit room adorned with occult symbols, Thomas stood before an altar. His hands glided over peculiar objects, feathers, bones, and vials filled with unknown substances. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy as he chanted in a language unfamiliar to their ears. They watched as shadows seemed to coalesce around him, swaying in time with his incantations. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, the town's fear deepened. It was clear that Thomas Blackwood was no ordinary neighbor. He was entwined with dark forces that defy comprehension. Those who dared to investigate him further found a trail of cryptic symbols leading to a hidden basement beneath his house. Gathering their courage, a small group of townsfolk ventured into the depths beneath 34 Briarwood Lane. There, they discovered a labyrinthine network of tunnels, each adorned with morbid symbols and dripping with an unsettling moisture. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the walls seemed to pulse with an ancient malevolence. At the heart of the maze, they found Thomas Blackwood engaged in a ritual of unimaginable horror. His chants had grown louder, and the shadows around him swirled with a sinister intensity. As he raised a knife above a grotesque altar, a portal of darkness opened before him, emanating a bone-chilling cold that sucked the warmth from the air. Fear and determination propelled the townspeople into action. They confronted Thomas, their voices shaking but resolute. The enigmatic figure turned to them, his eyes gleaming with a chilling mirth. He revealed his true nature, a practitioner of ancient and forbidden magic, a collector of souls for power beyond mortal comprehension. A desperate struggle ensued, with the group of townsfolk using their combined strength to break the ritual's hold. The portal wavered, and with one final push, they managed to disrupt the flow of dark energy. Thomas Blackwood's face twisted into a mask of rage as the portal collapsed in on itself, pulling him into the abyss. The basement trembled and groaned as the arcane energy was released. The symbols etched into the walls faded away, and the tunnels crumbled into ruin. The group of survivors escaped the collapsing labyrinth just in time, their faces marked with sweat and terror. With Thomas Blackwood's disappearance, the house at 34 Briarwood Lane stood empty once again. The twisted vines slowly receded, and the town began to heal from the ordeal. But the memory of the enigmatic figure lingered, a haunting reminder that darkness could reside even in the most seemingly ordinary places. Years passed, and the tales of Thomas Blackwood transformed into urban legends. Some believed he had been consumed by the very forces he sought to control, while others whispered that he had found a way to transcend mortality, waiting for the right moment to return. The story of the creepy guy living next door became a chilling cautionary tale, a reminder that the line between the mundane and the supernatural was thinner than anyone could have ever imagined. And so, the town of Briarwood Lane remained forever haunted by the enigma that once dwelled amongst them. Story 3, Shadows of Obsession, the adult film star. The city's neon lights cast eerie glows across the damp streets as Jenna Reed, a renowned adult film star, stepped out of a glamorous party. The night air was thick with an unsettling tension, making her instinctively clutch her coat tighter around her slender frame. Jenna knew the price of fame all too well, but tonight, something felt different. With each echoing footstep, her heart quickened. She had heard whispers about fans who crossed the line, but she never believed she'd be their target. As she walked briskly, her heels clicking against the pavement, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. A chill raced down her spine, and she stole quick glances behind her, only to find empty sidewalks and cold, misty air. Reaching her sleek black car, Jenna's breath hitched as she noticed a single red rose lying on the windshield. Confusion bowed with alarm within her, but before she could react, a strange noise echoed from the shadows. Her pulse raced as she locked herself in the car and peered into the obscurity, her heart pounding in her chest like a desperate plea for escape. Days turned into weeks, and Jenna's unease deepened. The Crimson Rose incident was just the beginning. Anonymous gifts began to arrive at her doorstep, lavish bouquets, handwritten notes professing admiration that turned increasingly sinister. She reported the incidents to the police, but without concrete evidence, they could do little more than increase patrols around her neighborhood. Jenna's work began to suffer. Her scenes, once filled with passion and confidence, now bore traces of fear that she couldn't conceal. As the situation escalated, her co-stars grew concerned, and the once thriving set became a somber reminder of her crumbling sense of safety. One evening, as she wrapped up a particularly difficult shoot, Jenna received a call. An icy voice whispered threats, detailing her every movement over the past week. Her blood turned to ice, and she was paralyzed with terror. The stalker was watching her, studying her every move, and leaving her vulnerable in her own life. Jenna's world spiraled into a nightmarish abyss. Every shadow seemed to hold hidden eyes, every unfamiliar face became a potential threat. Sleep became elusive as her dreams were plagued by a haunting figure, a faceless phantom that pursued her relentlessly. Desperation led her to hire a private investigator. Armed with determination, they delved into her past, digging for any potential leads. Jenna's life story was laid bare, a mix of triumphs and vulnerabilities. As they pieced together the puzzle, an unsettling connection emerged. Someone from her past, someone who had seemingly vanished, was resurfacing. As the investigator continued to dig, they unearthed an old classmate named Alex Mercer. An introverted student with an intense fascination for Jenna, he had been infatuated with her even before her fame. He had disappeared from their lives after graduation, leaving behind only a faint trail of unfulfilled dreams. With a newfound focus, Jenna and the investigator began to scrutinize Alex's past. His obsession with her had grown from innocent admiration to something far more sinister. They discovered hidden diaries filled with disturbing fantasies, details of her daily life, and the eerie progression of his fixation over the years. Their investigation took them deeper into the city's underbelly, following obscure leads that hinted at Alex's presence. It was a stormy night when they finally uncovered the truth, a rundown apartment building, its halls cloaked in shadows, where Alex had been silently orchestrating his twisted game. Inside, the tension was palpable. Jenna's heart hammered against her chest as they navigated dimly lit corridors, the distant echo of their footsteps mingling with her rapid breaths. They reached the end of a hallway, and before them stood a cracked door, behind which lay the culmination of their journey. With a deep breath, Jenna pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit room illuminated by the flickering glow of a computer screen. There, surrounded by photographs of Jenna in various stages of her life, sat Alex Mercer. His eyes were wild, his face contorted with a mixture of elation and madness. The confrontation was electric, charged with emotions that had simmered for years. Alex's voice oscillated between soft whispers of adoration and chilling threats. He was trapped in a world of delusion where Jenna was the object of his desires, the embodiment of his dreams and nightmares. As the police closed in, Alex's grasp on reality wavered. In his deranged mind, Jenna was both a savior and a tormentor. His obsession had transformed him into a puppet, dancing to the strings of a puppeteer only he could see. Jenna stood her ground, her fear replaced by a fierce determination to reclaim her life. She faced her stalker, her voice unwavering as she demanded answers, seeking closure. Slowly, the truth began to surface, the loneliness that had consumed Alex, the isolation that had fed his obsession, and the journey that had led him down a path of no return. The trial that followed was a whirlwind of emotions. Alex Mercer was deemed mentally unstable and was institutionalized, his life forever confined within the walls of a psychiatric facility. Jenna found solace in the support of friends and colleagues, rebuilding her shattered sense of security. Though the scars of the ordeal would never fully fade, Jenna emerged stronger, determined to rewrite her narrative. The incident had left her with a heightened sense of vulnerability, but also with a newfound resilience. The shadows that had once haunted her were slowly replaced by the light of her own strength, illuminating the path to a future untainted by fear. Story 4: Farmhouse Basement Terror. In the heart of the countryside stood an old farmhouse, its time-worn facade bearing witness to a century of secrets. Nestled beneath a canopy of gnarled trees, the structure exuded an aura of mystery that sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to approach. The townsfolk whispered of unexplained happenings, eerie noises, and an unmistakable malevolence lurking within its walls. As twilight settled over the land, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers towards the farmhouse, a chill breeze rustled through the overgrown grass. The air was thick with unease, and the house itself seemed to creak in response to the impending darkness. The Johnson family, new to the area and oblivious to the stories, had recently moved in, drawn to the rustic charm of the old dwelling. Their curiosity piqued, the Johnsons began to explore their new home. The creaky wooden floors carried the weight of generations as they traversed the corridors, each step echoing like a mournful sigh. In the basement, a heavy door concealed the abyss below, a yawning chasm that seemed to swallow all light. The smell of damp earth and decay clung to the air, and a sense of dread gnawed at the edges of their consciousness. Days turned into nights, and the Johnsons settled into their routine. Yet, even in the brightness of day, odd occurrences became frequent visitors. Objects shifted without explanation, strange whispers floated through the rooms, and the temperature plummeted in isolated pockets of the house. The family dismissed these as mere coincidences, attributing them to the quirks of an old building. But the veil of skepticism began to lift when young Emily Johnson started talking to an unseen presence. She spoke of a shadowy figure that dwelled in the basement, a friend she had lovingly named Mr. Scratch. Her parents chalked it up to an overactive imagination, comforting her with the notion that he was just a product of her creativity. One fateful night, as a storm unleashed its fury outside, the family was awakened by a series of chilling shrieks that seemed to emanate from the basement. Emily's eyes were wide with terror as she insisted that Mr. Scratch was in danger. Despite their apprehension, her parents gathered the courage to descend into the depths, armed with flashlights and trembling resolve. The basement was a realm of shadows, the feeble beams of light barely denting the oppressive darkness. As they moved forward, the temperature dropped drastically, breaths visible in the icy air. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the abyss, an unsettling blend of whispers and screams that seemed to come from all directions at once. Emily clung to her parents, tears streaking down her cheeks. And then they saw him, a figure, barely discernible in the obscurity. Mr. Scratch materialized like a specter, his form shifting and indistinct. Emily's pleas turned into anguished cries as she begged her parents to save her friend. Fear and compassion tugged at their hearts, torn between rescuing their daughter from an unseen danger and acknowledging the very presence they had denied. In an instant, the basement seemed to awaken, a malevolent force surging from the shadows. The air grew frigid, the walls closing in with an almost sentient intent. Their flashlights flickered and died, plunging them into an abyss of total darkness. Panic gripped their hearts as the presence loomed closer, a sinister aura pressing against their very souls. Emily's screams pierced the void as the malevolent force seized her parents, their bodies suspended in midair, paralyzed by an invisible grip. Desperation fueled their struggle, but it was a futile battle against an ancient darkness that thrived on fear. Mr. Scratch, now a swirling maelstrom of shadows, watched with hollow eyes as their defiance crumbled. In the days that followed, the Johnsons' farmhouse stood as a stark reminder of the darkness that dwelled beneath. It became a place shunned by the villagers, its windows boarded, its doors locked with chains. The story of the family's disappearance spread like wildfire, a chilling tale of a sinister force that had claimed them, dragging them into the depths of an otherworldly abyss. The farmhouse, once a beacon of rustic charm, now stood as a monument to terror, a place where the veil between the mortal realm and the unknown had been irrevocably torn. The whispers of Mr. Scratch echoed through the years, a haunting refrain that reminded all who heard it of the malevolent abyss that lay beneath the surface of the world, waiting for the next curious soul to succumb to its insidious grasp. Final story: the Gravediggers' descent. In the heart of a desolate town nestled between dark forests and mist-shrouded hills lay the forgotten cemetery of Murville. Its name whispered dread, its tombstones loomed like sentinels guarding the secrets of the dead. Few dared to venture near it, especially after twilight, for tales of eerie happenings and unexplained disappearances had woven themselves into the fabric of local legend. Amid this grim landscape, there toiled a man named Elias Thorne, a gravedigger by trade. His gaunt frame, perpetually draped in tattered clothing, seemed to merge seamlessly with the somber atmosphere. Elias was a man of few words, haunted by his past and shackled to the present by necessity. The cemetery was his nightly domain, a place where he faced his solitude and reckoned with the unknown. One evening, as the setting sun cast long, chilling shadows across the graveyard, Elias commenced his work. With a rusty shovel in hand, he began to dig into the earth, each clump of dirt echoing like a dirge in the silence. The moon hung low, casting an otherworldly glow that seemed to intensify the eerie beauty of the tombstones. As Elias dug deeper into the soil, a shiver crept down his spine. A faint whisper, like a sigh carried on the wind, brushed against his ears. Startled, he glanced around, finding nothing but the rustling of leaves and the moonlight filtering through the branches. He shook his head, attributing it to his frayed nerves, and continued his work. With every shovel of dirt he displaced, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They formed a symphony of murmurs, indistinct yet urgent, as though the very earth he was disturbing held untold stories that longed to be heard. His heartbeat quickened as the shadows around him seemed to writhe, coalescing into vague shapes that danced at the edges of his vision. Elias tried to dismiss the bizarre phenomenon, chalking it up to fatigue or his mind playing tricks. But when he looked down into the hole he had dug, his breath caught in his throat. Emerging from the earth were skeletal fingers, reaching upward as if clawing their way to freedom. His scream echoed through the graveyard, mingling with the cacophony of whispers that now seemed to emanate from the very ground itself. Elias stumbled back, his eyes wide with terror. He watched in disbelief as the skeletal fingers transformed into a skeletal hand, then an entire arm, and finally, the visage of a woman emerged from the ground. She was clad in tattered garments, her hair matted and soil-stained. Her eyes were hollow sockets that bore into Elias's soul with a mixture of sadness and longing. "Help me," her voice echoed in his mind, a plea that sent shivers down his spine. "Release me from this wretched place." Elias's rationality fought against his fear, and he realized he had to uncover the truth behind this haunting. Guided by equal parts curiosity and dread, he resumed digging, unearthing more of the woman's form. With each shovelful of dirt, her figure became clearer, and her spectral features seemed to grow less tormented. As he dug, the woman's tale unfurled in his mind like a ghostly tapestry. She had been a victim of betrayal and cruelty in life, and her body had been hidden away in an unmarked grave. Her restless spirit had been trapped, her voice unheard, her story untold. Elias, driven by empathy and an inexplicable connection, vowed to free her from her earthly prison. Elias worked tirelessly through the night, the whispers growing louder and more fervent with each passing moment. The moon waned, and the night deepened, as if time itself were being manipulated by the forces at play. With a final shovelful of earth, Elias uncovered the woman's entire form, and her presence seemed to expand, casting an ethereal glow that illuminated the darkness around them. The whispers that once haunted him now formed words, telling tales of tragedy, betrayal, and injustice that had befallen many souls laid to rest in Myrtville Cemetery. These were the stories of those long forgotten, stories that craved release from the confines of forgotten graves. Elias became their conduit, their voice in the world of the living. With a surge of energy that defied explanation, Elias joined hands with the spectral woman. The ground trembled, and the tombstones quivered as the earth itself seemed to recoil from the overwhelming power that was unleashed. A blinding light engulfed the graveyard, banishing the shadows and revealing the stories that had been hidden for generations. In the midst of the dazzling brilliance, the spirits of the forgotten souls materialized, their forms taking shape around the cemetery. Their anguish and bitterness transformed into ethereal tendrils that spiraled toward the sky, dissipating into the night like smoke. With each release, a gentle peace settled upon the graveyard, and the restless whispers faded into silence. The spectral woman turned to Elias, her hollow eyes now softened with gratitude. "Thank you, kind soul. You have given us the chance to be heard, to find closure, and to finally rest in peace." Elias nodded, a weight lifted from his heart as the stories that had haunted him for so long found their resolution. The graveyard, once a place of dread, was now suffused with a tranquility that could only be described as divine. As the first light of dawn began to pierce the horizon, Elias gazed upon the transformed cemetery, knowing that he had played a pivotal role in bringing solace to the departed. From that night forward, Myrtville Cemetery bore witness to no more unexplained disappearances or eerie occurrences. The town, once shrouded in superstition, embraced a newfound serenity, unaware of the darkness that had once held sway. Elias Thorne, the grave digger, continued to tend to the resting place of those who had passed, his heart at peace and his soul forever connected to the whispered shadows of midnight. If you enjoyed these stories, please give a like and subscribe for more haunting stories. And remember, you never know what might be standing behind you watching your every move.